After her father passed away, Emma drove back to her family home in Maine, a small, weathered house overlooking the grey Atlantic. It was early autumn, and the trees were beginning to turn gold. The silence inside the house felt heavier than she remembered. Dust covered old photographs and her father's favorite jacket still hung by the door. Every corner reminded her of the man who had been her only family and her closest friend. A week after the funeral, someone knocked on the door. When she opened it, a man stood there holding a small bag of tools and a gentle smile. "Emma," he said softly. "It's Michael Turner, your father's old friend." His voice carried warmth and a trace of the past she hadn't been ready to face. She remembered his name from stories her father used to tell. Michael had been his college roommate, a man he trusted more than anyone. Michael explained that he had promised her father he would help take care of the house if anything ever happened. Emma hesitated at first, unsure about letting someone from her father's past into her quiet, grieving world. But there was something steady in Michael's eyes. Something honest. She nodded, and he began helping the next morning. From the moment he stepped inside, the place started to feel different. Michael wasn't loud or overly talkative. He worked calmly, fixing broken shelves, repairing squeaky doors, and cleaning the garden that had long been ignored. Emma helped where she could, though she often found herself watching him instead. He seemed to move with purpose, as if every nail and every brushstroke was a way to keep her father's memory alive. One afternoon, they tried to fit a wooden shelf into a narrow corner of the living room. Emma held one end, struggling to push it in. "It's too tight," she said, frustrated. Michael smiled, his voice calm. "Don't be afraid," he said softly. "It will fit." He adjusted the angle, guided her hands gently, and the shelf slid perfectly into place. Emma laughed quietly, surprised at how simple it had been. That something in his tone stayed with her. The way he'd said it, as if the words meant more than just fixing furniture. "Don't be afraid, it will fit." It echoed in her mind all evening, strange yet comforting. Later that night, Emma sat alone by the fireplace, sipping tea. She could hear Michael moving around in the workshop outside, still working even as the sun disappeared. For the first time in months, she felt safe. Not because someone was protecting her, but because she wasn't facing everything alone anymore. The days passed quickly. Michael showed her how to repair small things, how to tighten a hinge, change a light switch, and patch the old wooden floor. He never treated her like a helpless girl. He talked to her like an equal, like someone capable. And slowly, the house began to look alive again. One evening, Emma found an old photo in a drawer. It showed her father and Michael when they were young, smiling, standing beside an old car. They looked like brothers. When she showed it to him, Michael chuckled softly. "That was the summer we built this porch," he said. "Your dad made me promise we'd finish it before college started again." Emma smiled faintly, touched by the memory. "He always talked about you," she said. "He said you were the kind of friend who never gave up on people." Michael looked down, the corner of his mouth curving in a quiet smile. He was the kind of man who made it easy to keep promises. That night, the sound of rain fell gently against the windows. Emma couldn't sleep. She thought about her father, about loss, and about how strange it was that a man from her father's past could bring such calm into her present. She didn't understand why she felt drawn to him. Maybe it was the way he carried quiet strength, or maybe it was because he seemed to understand her pain, without her having to say a word. Still, she told herself it was nothing more than friendship. Gratitude, maybe. After all, Michael was older, and her father's best friend. Nothing more could come of it. But as the wind whispered through the trees outside, Emma realized something had shifted. The house no longer felt like a place of sorrow. It felt like a home again, warm, alive, and filled with the sound of two people learning how to heal. And deep down, she knew that this was only the beginning, that whatever was happening between them was something neither of them had planned. That maybe, just maybe, it was meant to be. As days turned into weeks. The house began to breathe again. The dusty air turned into the scent of fresh paint and warm coffee. Emma found herself falling into a rhythm. Mornings filled with the sound of hammering, afternoons spent painting, and evenings where she and Michael sat outside watching the sun disappear over the water. It felt peaceful in a way she hadn't known since her father's death. Michael had a quiet way of being present. He didn't try to comfort her with big speeches or empty words. Instead, he helped her fix broken things, the roof that leaked, the old window that stuck, even the fence her father never finished. Somewhere between those small repairs, Emma started to feel whole again. One Saturday morning, she found him in the garden trimming old branches. The sleeves of his shirt were rolled up, and he looked lost in thought. "You don't have to do all this," she said, stepping outside. "You've already done enough." He looked up, smiling lightly. "I made your father a promise," he said. "Besides, I like it here." That last sentence caught her off guard. She smiled but looked away, pretending to check the mail just to hide the warmth rising in her chest. That evening, as the sky turned orange, they sat on the porch sipping coffee. The air smelled of salt and pine, and the sound of waves in the distance made everything feel calm. Michael stared at the horizon and said, "Your father used to sit right here and talk about life. He always said this view reminded him of peace." Emma nodded slowly. "He loved this house," she said softly. "He used to tell me that if something ever happened to him, this place would take care of me." Michael looked at her then, his eyes gentle, but with something unspoken behind them. "He was right," he said. "This place, it's special. It holds everything he loved." For a moment their eyes met. The air felt heavier, charged with something both comforting and confusing. Emma quickly looked down at her mug, her heart beat louder than the waves. She didn't know what she was feeling, only that it scared her a little. The next few days passed quietly. The weather grew colder, and the work slowed. Michael started spending more time fixing the fireplace and the insulation, preparing the house for winter. Emma cooked dinner most nights, and they ate together at the same table where her father once sat. It became their small routine, one that neither of them wanted to end. One night, after dinner, Emma noticed him sitting alone by the fire. His face looked tired, thoughtful. She hesitated, then asked, "Do you ever miss my dad?" Michael nodded, staring into the flames. "Every day," he said. "He was more than a friend. He was family." Emma swallowed hard. "He trusted you more than anyone," she said softly. "He told me that once." Michael turned to her. "He trusted me with what mattered most." His voice was low, almost a whisper. "That includes you." The words hit her heart like a quiet storm. She didn't know how to respond. The fire cracked softly, filling the silence. She saw something in his eyes, sadness, care, and maybe something deeper. Before she could say anything, he stood up. "It's late," he said, his tone gentle again. "You should rest." That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying his words over and over. "He trusted me with what mattered most." What did that mean exactly? Was it just about her safety? Or was there more he wasn't saying? The next morning, she found him by the porch, loading tools into his truck. "Are you leaving?" she asked quickly. He smiled. "Just going into town for supplies," he said. "You look worried." "I'm not," she replied too fast. Michael chuckled softly, handing her a cup of coffee. "You're a lot like your father," he said. "Strong, but you carry too much inside." Emma looked at him, unsure what to say. For a moment, she thought he might say something more, something that explained the quiet connection between them. But instead, he just smiled and got into his truck when he drove away. The house felt strangely empty again. She stood on the porch, watching the road until he disappeared. It wasn't until then that she realized how much his presence had changed everything. The air, the silence, even her grief. When he returned later that day, bringing wood and new supplies, she couldn't hide her relief. He noticed her smile and said, half teasing, "Missed me already?" She laughed lightly, trying to cover it. Maybe just the coffee. But inside, she knew it wasn't the coffee she missed. It was him. The calm he brought. The safety she felt when he was near as night fell. They stood outside again, side by side, watching the stars appear. Neither of them spoke, but both could feel something growing quietly between them, something that didn't need to be named just yet. Emma looked at the glowing windows of her father's house, then at Michael, and thought, maybe her father was right. Maybe this place would take care of her. But what she didn't know yet was that it wasn't just the house doing that anymore. It was him. Winter came early that year. By November, the old house by the coast was wrapped in white snow, the chimney puffing thin curls of smoke into the cold sky. Emma had never seen it look so beautiful. Inside, the warmth from the fire mixed with the smell of pine and coffee, and every corner felt alive again. Michael was still there, saying he wanted to make sure the heating worked properly before he left. But deep down, Emma sensed he wasn't in a hurry to go, and she didn't want him to. The days were quieter now. They spent hours indoors, fixing smaller things, reading or just talking. Emma found herself opening up to him more than she ever expected. She told him about her childhood, her dreams of becoming a teacher, and how she'd felt lost since her father passed away. Michael listened with genuine attention, never judging, never interrupting. Sometimes, when she spoke, he'd look at her in a way that made her heart feel unsteady, as if he saw more than she was saying. One snowy afternoon, while sorting through the attic, Emma found an old wooden chest. Inside were photo albums, handwritten letters, and a faded picture of her father and Michael from their college years. They looked carefree, standing in front of the same house, laughing. On the back of the photo were her father's words. "To my brother in spirit, take care of what matters most." She stared at the message, her throat tightening. "He meant me," she whispered without realizing it. Michael, who was beside her, took the photo gently. His eyes softened. "Yes," he said quietly. "He wanted you to have someone who'd look out for you when he couldn't." Emma looked at him, her eyes glistening. "You kept your promise," she said. "I tried," he replied, voice low. "But I didn't expect it to be this hard." She didn't understand what he meant at first. Then he turned toward the window, his jaw tense, his expression full of emotion he wasn't ready to show. "You remind me so much of him," he said after a moment. "But you're also different. You see the world like he did, but you feel things more deeply." The room felt still, heavy with words unsaid. Emma didn't know what to say. All she could hear was the sound of her heartbeat and the soft ticking of the clock. Something in the air had shifted again, quietly but completely. That evening, the two of them sat by the fire. Snow fell softly outside, and the only light in the room came from the flames. Emma sat with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, lost in thought. Michael handed her a cup of tea and sat beside her, keeping a careful distance. "You've done so much for me," she said. I don't even know how to thank you. You don't need to, he replied. I promised your father I'd help you stand on your own again. You've already done that. She smiled faintly. Maybe, but it doesn't feel like I'm standing alone anymore. He looked at her, and their eyes met again. A moment that seemed to last longer than it should. There was no need for words. Everything they felt was there in the silence. Emma could see the struggle in his face, the part of him that cared deeply, but didn't dare to show it. Suddenly, the fire cracked, breaking the quiet. Michael stood up quickly, setting his cup down. I should check the generator, he said, though they both knew it didn't need checking. When he left, Emma felt a strange ache in her chest, a mix of confusion, longing and guilt. She knew this wasn't something either of them had planned, but she couldn't stop what was growing between them. The next day, she tried to act normal, but the air between them had changed. Every glance, every small conversation carried a quiet tension. When she brushed past him in the hallway, their hands touched, and it sent a rush through her. She stepped back quickly, pretending nothing had happened, but her face grew warm. Michael noticed. Emma, he said gently, I don't want you to misunderstand anything. I don't, she said too quickly. But the truth was, she did. She didn't know what this feeling was or what to do with it. Later that night, she stood by the window, watching the snow fall under the porch light. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Michael's. He stopped beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. Your father loved this view, he said softly. He said it reminded him that life keeps moving, even when you're standing still. Emma nodded, trying to steady her voice. I think I'm finally starting to move again. Michael turned to her, eyes full of emotion. Good, he said quietly. That's all he ever wanted for you. And with that, he walked away, leaving Emma alone by the window. Heart pounding, realizing just how deeply he had become a part of her healing, and her heart. That night, as the snow continued to fall, she lay awake knowing one truth she couldn't deny anymore. She didn't just feel safe with him. She felt something more. Something that neither of them was ready to say out loud. By the time spring arrived, the snow had melted from the Maine coast, and the house stood firm against the sea breeze. Freshly painted, repaired, and full of warmth. What once felt broken was whole again. But for Emma, the hardest repair was the one happening inside her heart. The days with Michael had changed her life quietly, piece by piece. He wasn't just her father's old friend anymore. He had become part of her story, her healing, and her home. Michael had promised he would leave once the last of the work was done, but neither of them spoke much about that. Instead, they kept busy with final touches, planting flowers in the yard, repainting the porch, and fixing the small wooden gate that always stuck. They laughed more often now, but underneath every smile was the quiet understanding that their time together was almost over. One sunny morning, Emma walked into the kitchen and found Michael writing something on a piece of paper. He folded it quickly when she entered. What's that? She asked. He smiled faintly. Just notes on what still needs to be done. The place will be yours to take care of now. The words hit her harder than she expected. So, you're really leaving? Michael nodded slowly. I think it's time. You've rebuilt this house, and yourself too. That's what your father wanted. Emma looked down, hiding her disappointment. You helped me do that, she said quietly. He gave her a gentle smile. You did it yourself. I just kept my promise. The day passed in silence. They worked side by side without saying much. By evening, the house looked perfect, but the air between them was heavy. When Michael started loading his truck with tools, Emma stood on the porch, watching him. The same porch where so many quiet moments had passed between them. "Thank you," she said softly, as he closed the tailgate. "For everything." He looked at her with kind eyes. "Your father would be proud of you, Emma." She smiled weakly. "I hope so." When he turned to leave, her heart clenched. She took a step forward. "Michael," she called. He stopped, his back still to her. What if this isn't the end? He didn't turn right away. When he did, there was a mixture of care and pain in his eyes. "Emma," he said gently, "you have your whole life ahead of you. You don't need your father's friend holding you back." Her voice trembled. "You once told me not to be afraid. That it would fit." He froze for a moment. The memory of that day, the shelf, the laughter, and the quiet connection flashed between them. He walked toward her slowly. "That was about more than the shelf, wasn't it?" she whispered. Michael's voice was quiet. "I told myself it wasn't. But maybe it was." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sea wind moved through the trees, and the smell of spring flowers filled the air. Emma's eyes met his, full of everything she couldn't say. "You don't have to leave," she said softly. "Not yet." He looked torn, his hands tightening at his sides. "Emma, if I stay, I don't know if I can keep pretending this is just about your father's promise." "Then don't pretend," she whispered. The words hung in the air like a confession neither of them planned to make. Michael exhaled slowly, emotion flickering across his face. Love, fear, and something that felt like surrender. "You have a brave heart," he said quietly. "Your father was right. You always did." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his hand gentle. "Maybe this was never about fixing the house," he said. "Maybe it was about finding what still fits in a broken life." Tears filled her eyes, not of sadness but of relief. She nodded, unable to speak. For the first time since her father's death, she felt light, as if something long missing had finally found its place. Michael stayed that night, not because of duty, but because it felt right. They sat together on the porch as the sun went down, watching the sky turn gold and pink. No promises were made, no big words spoken. Just peace, the kind that comes when two lives quietly align. Weeks later, the town began to bloom again. Emma opened the windows, letting fresh air fill the house. Michael was still there, helping with the garden, laughing more easily now. They didn't talk about the future, but every glance, every shared smile, said enough. One afternoon, while planting flowers near the porch, Michael looked up and said with a soft grin, "See? I told you it would fit." Emma laughed, brushing dirt from her hands. "You were right, it just needed a little faith and care." And as the sea breeze carried their laughter across the yard, Emma realized her father's last wish had come true. She was no longer lost. The house was alive. Her heart was steady, and what once felt broken had found where it belonged. Sometimes, she thought, love doesn't need grand beginnings or perfect timing. It just needs two people brave enough to believe that even after loss, something new can still fit.